Stephen, we are so delighted to have the reputation guru here with us. And I've got a couple of questions for you. So, first of all, what is reputation? What's the difference between reputation and brand? And I also want to know, what are the drivers that actually shape reputation? So, break it down for us.
Yeah, sure. Let me start big picture. Your reputation is the ultimate consequence of everything you do and say. So in histories of time, everything you do is judged accordingly. What is held true in terms of word of mouth, stakeholder interaction, your own pre-held notions and conceptions and belief systems all constitute a reputation. And so therefore, the only way to truly measure it and assess it is through the eye of the beholder. So in other words, you have to look at stakeholders and their perspective of how they view your company to have an accurate representation of reputation. And in that regard, the difference between brand and reputation is really interesting because in many ways, your brand is the promise you intend to keep. By definition, your reputation is your own self-deduction as to whether that promise was fulfilled. So you make a lofty promise in platitudes through your advertising, your marketing communications program, your corporate communications strategy. And now I experience your brand and you let me down. Well, that's a ding on your reputation. You created an empty promise you couldn't keep. So therefore, ways, reputation and brand are two sides of the same coin. They're kind of interacted. So the promise versus promise kept is sort of the pendulum swing that happens in people's hearts and minds. But importantly, we can break it down by understanding there are 7 drivers that constitute reputation. And I'll break them down for you. Number 1, your products and services. Number 2, how innovative you are as a company. Number 3, perceptions of workplace. Number 4, your conduct and your acts of governance. Number 5, citizenship. 6, leadership, and 7, degree of ability to drive high performance, be it financial or business performance. So those things constitute 100% of the weight of reputation. How do we know? We've written a white paper on this. We've measured reputation for 25 years. I can tell you QED, for nearly every company, those are the 7 drivers that matter. What's important is that the difference between what's important to your company will rank, order, and change those 7 drivers. So if you're in technology, maybe leadership and conduct might be more important. If you're in food and beverage, maybe it's more about products and services and potentially innovation. So not all drivers are created equally. It depends on the industry in which you play. Importantly, the company that you are. All those things constitute a change up in the rank order of those 7 drivers and what matters to any given organization.
Stephen, it's always kind of been that the biggest factor for my reputation is what others say about me, right? Third-party advocacy. That's kind of what we always called it.
Yeah.
But and it's an AI world now since November of 2022. You feel that's changed the dynamic here, and that maybe it's not so much what we would call earned media, so much as maybe owned media. That's compelling.
Yeah, if you look at it from the stakeholder journey standpoint, there's a chain of events, say chain of events that begins with company-owned communications. You put your message out there, you obviously then invest in paid communications, and if you do a good job, you'll generate earned media impressions, right? So in that regard, that becomes sort of the point of reference. That third-party advocacy you talked about is critically important because it's an endorsement of your message and your reputation. But in the context of AI, it's reshuffling the entire paradigm. In many ways, because of the advent of AI, let me put it simply as I can, it's a new judgment day. New judgment day because what's being said about you, those secret whispers behind the scenes, those conversations that used to happen across the garden fence, those discussions that used to have in social media, and are amplified by AI. So in many ways, you have to look at AI as if it's unto itself its own stakeholder. So AI as a stakeholder, as a point of reference, allows you to take all the language learning models, all the unstructured data, and apply it to understand in many ways what is the impact of AI on your company's reputation, because it can be both an amplifier and an inhibitor. In many ways, I guess I characterize it as being like a canary in a coal mine. If someone's saying bad things about you, the language learning models will amplify that. If you can read that and act accordingly, maybe you can fend off and reduce the negative impact of that ahead of the curve. But you need to be able to measure AI as a stakeholder to do that, but align it with how people perceive you when it comes back to your standard reputation. So again, the yin and the yang of perceptions versus narrative coexist in the AI world. What's different, Doug, today is happening faster and more visibly, with greater dexterity and greater levels of amplification. So it's not for the faint-hearted, but be ready. Here comes the AI revolution.
Stephen, that leads me into crisis. So obviously reputation is an asset, it's a balance sheet asset. It needs to be protected. And in a crisis, you then see the outcome of how effectively the crisis was managed by the organization, depending upon, for instance, if it's a listed corporate, the stock prices is a great indicator. Now, do different type of crisis sort of hit differently in terms of the value of an organization? So, for instance, if it's a crisis that comes from competence of an organization versus, say, character, so character of the CEO, being caught doing something that wasn't considered legitimate in his personal life or her personal life. Talk to me about those different types of crisis.
Because you're right to point out that not all crises are created equally. And it depends on the industry and also depends on the root cause. And as you correctly point out, there's a sort of balancing act between competence versus character. And earlier I walked you through the 7 drives of reputation. So think about it this way. Under competence, you have measures of products and services, innovation, and performance. So how well you do as a company based on your delivery of product, how fast you are to new products to market, and are you making a fair profit? And I'd argue 25, 30 years ago, that was enough to have a strong reputation because who cares about your conduct? You're making money as a business and life is good, right? Well, how the world has changed, because for the other 7 drivers I talked about related to workplace, citizenship, conduct, and leadership tie more directly back to character. And I can tell you empirically, and this is off our most recent global rep truck study, which is just fielded in 14 countries around the world, that 45% of the weight of importance in driving reputation is based on competence, 55% is based on character, based on those distributions of those 7 drivers. So what does it tell you? Is character matters more than ever before. It's not just based on character alone. You can't be a good-hearted, warm, kind company and not make a fair profit and have a good business. It's a combination of the two. But in terms of a point of comparison, character today is in aggregate more important than competence. So therefore, when it comes to managing your reputation and working through a crisis, if all you do is say, hey, we're doing great, we're making a great product here and making a fair profit, that's not enough to win the argument in the court of public opinion. And I'm trying to think of one example. Maybe Facebook comes to mind. So think about Facebook. You wouldn't argue that Facebook is lousy when it comes to its product delivery and good at innovation and has a profitable business. But you might argue against its character. So going back to the meddling of the Russian interference during the 2016 election, you think about Cambridge Analytica and the whole sort of scandal related to that. And even fast forward to current day, there's a big impending landmark lawsuit related to the use of teens' access to social media content and whether it's considered addictive or not. All those things come into question related to the character of Facebook. So over time, you've seen Facebook basically precipitate and fall from being one of the most reputable companies in the world to not even being in the top 500 because of character, not because of competence. So I guess the point here is, good news travels fast, but bad news travels faster. And when it sticks around related to character, it's much harder to come back and reputation rebound when you've been through a crisis, Facebook being a point example. Tesla being another recent example is the point I could cite.
Yeah. What goes into the character measurement? I'm asking that because today we live in a world of some people are square and some people are round, right? Or I could say red and blue, but immediately you'd start drawing political connections. Someone's good character might be someone else's terrible character, right? Elon Musk, perfect example. There are those who love Elon for being out there, creative, right? And others, sweet God, they won't even sign up for it. They've canceled their X account because of Elon.
Well, let's unpack that because that's really intriguing. You've got a whole bundle of raw nerves and emotions in that very statement. So think about Tesla as an organization. Politically, where do you think it sits on the political spectrum? There's a divergence between Tesla as a company and potentially Elon Musk as the leader. They're potentially on opposite ends of the spectrum, right? In terms of his historical points of reference, electronic vehicles, the sort of more sustainable kind of manufacturing process that Elon Musk created for Tesla, the very nature of what the cars do. Again, all going back to competence, were more leftward leaning, more democratic, you'd say in American cadence, more related to the preservation of the environment. But are those the same values of Elon Musk, the leader? You think of the whole Dodge phenomenon and some of the things he's publicly said and the way he runs what is now considered X, but previously known as Twitter, it's more right-leaning. So now you've got a major contradiction. You have the perspective of Elon Musk as a leader, judged based on his character, and if you measure him as an entity based on being a strong and appealing leader, you see a precipitous decline going back from 2023 to where it is today, and you see the same decline highly correlate with the fall in Tesla's reputation. And by the way, you've seen a falling decline in the number of cars sold. So there's a perfect example of how reputation has business consequences. Going back to the character of the leader, which is in many ways meant to be the tip of the spear, the sort of moral barometer or ethical point of reference for any given brand relationship. And it's in divergence with the integrity of what the cars represent. So really intriguing contradiction. I'm not sure how it's going to play out, but I've been very closely watching the IPO of SpaceX to see how the Elon Musk factor plays into space exploration, and the whole Tesla phenomenon kind of kicks back in related to the world at large and how people relate to the organization today.
That's really fascinating. Stephen, there are some people, perhaps some people would argue it's old school of thought, that if you do good work and you behave in a upright manner, then actually, everything will be okay for your business, for your organization. But actually, that's perhaps not the case anymore, because you have misinformation and you have disinformation. So what would you say to the PRs that are tuning in, who perhaps work for organizations that don't really like to raise their head above the parapet? They don't really invest so much in monitoring and protecting reputation, and they believe in that old school way of thinking. What kind of arguments would you give to our listeners and audience so that they can go and actually make the case for proactive reputation management?
Yeah, it's complicated, but I'm going to try and break it down for you and simplify as much as I can. So there's obviously the parallels of having a good business and doing good. Having a good business is more related to profitability. Doing good is more related to goodwill. And goodwill is discounted by misinformation and sort of lack of understanding and all the things that matter to people when they evaluate a brand and reputation. So, you've got to understand that dynamic. And in many ways, those combination of things between character and competence as a recurring theme directly go back and impact reputation. But reputation is not the end all, it's the means to the end. And the end all is actually the business outcome. So what are you really solving for? You're solving for the opportunity to create license to operate and generate benefit of the doubt. If you look at it that way, you end up with a different conclusion. And to accomplish that, you need to know how to actively manage your reputation. Like the 7 drivers I talked about are like the levers of a compass, where you know which ones to pull, which ones to navigate, which ones to amplify. So as a means end, you take your reputation and align it to the business outcomes. And if we can earn benefit of the doubt, what does that allow you to do? 1, defend against any future crisis and any hostile reactions to your company and your brand and what you stand for. But 2, when the moment of a crisis comes, give people the opportunity to think, well, maybe I've got to think twice about how this impacts the organization, because over time they've earned such a wonderful benefit of the doubt, and my hearts and minds, my recollection of the organization is very positive. So is it really that bad, or do I really believe this negative news? Maybe you have a second or third chance when you have the benefit of the doubt. So I think sort of the fast answer to your question, Farzana, is understand reputation, how to navigate it, but most importantly, amplify and optimize it based on your desired business outcome. And examples of that would be, is it your potential to generate sales or drive positive advocacy, create trust, benefit the doubt, attract the best talent, amplify market valuation. The outcome matters the most, because reputation is the instrument to how you achieve that stated goal. So focus on the business outcome, not merely just the reputation and its implications.
And would you say, Stephen, that most business outcomes are really based upon having a friction-free relationship with your stakeholders, and that's what good reputation delivers?
Yeah, for sure, because tension causes gnarly feelings, and they're not always positive, right? So yes, I mean, people often talk about winning the hearts and minds and the wallets of people, and that's important in how you do that. But at the same time, it can't just be based on empty platitudes of raw emotion. There has to be substantive reasons to believe, sort of credible points of proof you can identify. Again, going back to those 7 drivers, which of those matter the most to your stakeholder? The weight of importance will determine what you should choose to prioritize. If you're in technology, as an example, maybe you do prioritize leadership as a point of reference, and that will help you amplify your reputation, given the means end of the goal you're trying to accomplish in the first place.
Thank you.
I hear you on the friction-free thing and what a perfect world, but the reality is sometimes we want friction. Sometimes I need to encourage people to change behavior or think about it differently, right? So if friction-free is the easier path, we change nothing. And perhaps that's not the reputation I'm seeking to build. Back to Elon Musk. Not that I want to sit and defend Elon. He didn't need me to defend him. But Elon lives in a world where he wants friction because he wants the world, in his view, to change.
Yeah, I'd rather use the word disruption versus friction, because friction connotes a starting of a fire, and whereas disruption could also lead to positive change. And I'd preface it with the word positive disruption, because disruption for negativity's sake is not a good thing either. So yes, I do believe that positive disruption is required occasionally to cause people to reset and reconsider. So if you're a company that's been through a reputation crisis and you want people to take a second look, what do? You need positive disruption. If you're in a highly commoditized sea of sameness where your reputation is average, same as everyone else, no point of difference, what do? You need positive disruption. So you need a point of proof, and you're not making noise for noise sake. You're making it with the context of winning your heart and mind with the perspective of forging a longer, more deep, meaningful relationship for the future. So if you speak to me in the right way, if you do and say the right thing, and you have the burden of proof to back it up, there's a good chance you'll win my vote as a member of the court of public opinion. But if it's just about messaging for the sake of messaging, a new campaign, a new image, a new whatever, that's not sustainable enough and doesn't generate long-term reputational equity.
Now, Stephen, from your vantage point, you analyze individuals, organizations, their reputations day in, day out, year in, year out. Which organizations and individuals do you specifically actually think they're doing a really good job of managing their reputation?
Yeah, we're about to release our global RepTrack study for 2026. I can't divulge any trade secrets, but I can allude to a couple of things. At least, if I would look back in time in 2025 as my point of reference, I'd probably start to anoint companies like Lego as being a best practice in reputation management, right? So Lego is typically a brand that most people love. I mean, because of their childhood, because of their kids, because of the relationship it builds in terms of fun and joy and curiosity and sense of learning. And you think about Lego, what it really stands for, it's reinvented itself as a company that stands for more than just plastic bricks, right? So Lego is a franchise, it's a theme park, it's a franchise of movies, it's got themed characters, it's an innovation hub. I mean, it's just so many things to so many different people. And it's a single-minded sense of purpose of sort of really building a better tomorrow and aligning with people who feel that way with a sense of play and joy and curiosity. So that would be an example of a company that I think has, over the test of time, stayed true to its reputation and built a reputational equity that is just universal. And most people have only nice things to say about Lego because of that.
Okay, you mentioned the best toy in the world, by the way, Lego. You mentioned the study. Selfishly, where do podcasts fit on that in terms of reputation driver? Because everything we read is that podcasts, there's just a study out today, podcasts drive 23 times more trust than social media. So what did you find? Anything pertaining to podcasting in your study?
Not specific to podcasting, but just a reference.
Stephen, you missed it. You missed. Yeah.
But let me finish my point. I would say the authenticity of a live human interaction still cannot be beaten by any electronic form of instrument. So whether it's social or text or email, they're utilitarian, they're helpful, but actually a human interaction, that's still pretty powerful. So that's why I think you get the plus side for podcasts. But I will say, back to one of the early points you made, you can assess the difference between aggregate touch points, and you talked specifically about owned versus media. One of the most underrepresented opportunities for any given company is the power of leveraging owned media to the success of driving media relationships and impacting positive search behavior when it comes to AI. In fact, I can note that across the world, on average for any given company, only 28% of the given target market, and I'm going to refer to them as the general population, are aware of any company-owned communications. And of those 28%, it typically yields a 7 to 8 point reputation bounce. On a scale to 100, that's a significant lift. So I would say many companies are underestimating the power of owned media, and there's still an opportunity to win in the marketplace. And it could, unto itself, be the difference between an average to good reputation just by the merits of how you choose to use owned media and skillfully apply it to, again, focus on the stakeholders that matter the most to you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Stephen.